Superman is one of the oldest characters in comic book history, and there have been many adaptations of the character, with countless comic books and multiple animated and live-action movies, varying from really good ones and really bad ones. In this video, I'm going to analyze the most recent depiction of Superman and explain the things James Gunn needs to do in order for Superman 2025 to be good. In 2013, the DCEU was created to compete with the MCU since Marvel had made a cinematic universe that had the entertainment business in a chokehold. So, to compete, DC released Man of Steel, the introduction of the first superhero in their cinematic universe. And it received mixed reviews, and justifiably so. When it comes to the visuals, I would say the movie is not bad at all, but the writing on the other hand, is a completely different story. Man of Steel begins with Jor-El in Krypton, which I think it was a terrible idea because everyone knows Superman's story. Everyone knows that Krypton explodes, and before this happens, Superman is sent to Earth. So the whole beginning of the story is a waste of time. After this sequence of events, Clark is seen saving a bunch of people from an oil rig. And honestly, that whole sequence was really cool. But afterward, Clark is basically naked from the fire and he goes ahead and steals clothes from a random family's backyard. That is something that Superman would never do. Superman is one of the nicest people ever. If Zack Snyder actually read Superman comics, he will know that instead of stealing the clothes, Clark would have knocked on the door and asked if he could borrow the clothes. And you can see this throughout the movie. Such small things that take you out of the movie. Like that one scene when the waitress is getting harassed, and Clark destroys the harasser's truck in an act of revenge. And having read Superman, he would have never acted vengeful. But there are also a lot of big stupid things that happen in the movie as well. For example, Jonathan Kent is absolutely stupid in this movie. In the comics, when the Kents realize that Clark has superpowers, they encourage him to use them to help people. They treat Clark's powers like a blessing that is supposed to be shared with humanity. In the movie, it's the complete opposite. No one can find out he has powers because he's going to be taken advantage of, or the military is going to experiment on him. There is a point in the story where Clark is on a school trip and he is getting bullied on the school bus, and the bus ends up having an accident where it runs itself into a lake, and Clark ends up having a heroic moment where he saves everyone. And me as the audience, I'm thinking, oh cool, this is when we see the beginnings of Superman. But nope. Jonathan scolds Clark because he used his powers to save people. He even says that he should have let them drown. Like what? Plus, Jonathan sacrifices his life for no reason in that scene of the tornado. Clark could have easily saved them. Anyways, going back to the small things, I don't feel the suit. Superman's suit is supposed to be colorful. Colorful enough that when you see it, it impacts you. It is like a beam of hope just hit you. And in the movie, it's a dark blue and dark red that just makes you depressed when you see it. Honestly, the whole movie feels this way. It is really great for some reason. I am not going to go too deep into the whole Lois and Clark relationship because it doesn't make sense at all. Like, literally in the first encounter, Clark uses his eye beams to save Lois's life, beaming them through her stomach, and after that, I don't know how she can fall in love with him. Plus, she finds out he is Superman super easily. Like, if she can find out he is Superman, why the military doesn't? They have more resources than she does. Then we arrive at the big finale. The fight between Superman and General Zod. The fight looks really cool, but they destroyed the whole city. Don't you think Superman would do anything in his power to have the least casualties as possible? In the movie, he sends Zod through buildings where people are still trying to evacuate. And finally, the whole I-beam scene. Don't you think that if Superman is strong enough to snap Zod's neck, shouldn't he be strong enough to hold his head away from the victims? I know there are many things I didn't mention about this movie, but if I talk about everything, this video it might be 2 hours long. 3 years later, in 2016, we got Batman v Superman. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Once this was announced, I was really excited. I thought Batman v Superman was going to be like Batman The Dark Knight Returns comic book, but I was totally wrong. If you read The Dark Knight Returns, you know why Batman and Superman fight. They fight because of different ideals, not because they somehow don't like each other. This is crazy because in the comics, they literally are best friends. So when the movie came out and I found out the reason why they fought each other was because of what happened 2 years before, I was done with this franchise. Batman is a detective. He would have never jumped to a conclusion without some sort of evidence. This is why The Batman is the greatest Batman movie ever. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see a video about the Batman movie. Let's get back to Batman v Superman. The interpretation of Superman is awful. In the movie, they treat him like this emotionless person who believes he's a god. I get society treating him like a god, because honestly, if there is a person among us with powers like that, I would believe that person is a god. But Superman would react differently. He would literally come out and say, "Hey guys, I am human like the rest of you." Plus, Batman gets to a point where he almost kills Superman. Like, Zack, what are we thinking? Not every movie needs to be like Watchmen. Not only that, but then Doomsday shows up at the end to create a team up between them. This movie is a mess. They added Wonder Woman in the middle of the movie with no introduction or background to the character. Of course, comic book readers are going to know who she is, but the regular audience member is going to be confused. And then a whole year later, we get her origin story. This is why the DCEU never worked in the first place. They didn't have any sense of direction. They just threw stuff at the wall to see if it stuck, but nothing did. Since the DCEU was a financial disaster, Warner Brothers opted for a reboot, bringing in James Gunn as executive producer of the DC Cinematic Universe from the MCU. And so far, I think this is the best decision DC has made in a really long time. And you can feel the impact he had right away, making the Suicide Squad sequel, which was a substantial upgrade from the disaster that Suicide Squad was. He literally grabbed the garbage that Suicide Squad was and made a really good movie out of it. After this release, James made the decision to start over with DC Cinematic Universe, releasing everyone connected to prior projects, the biggest name being Henry Cavill. I remember when this was announced, everyone on social media was going crazy, since they just brought him back. But I didn't mind it. To start the DC Cinematic Universe, James announced the first movie, this movie being Superman, starring David Cornsweet, and man, I'm excited. You can tell James respects the characters he is basing the movie on, mentioning the new Superman movie is going to be based on All-Star Superman, one of the biggest Superman comics ever. Now that this is said, I am going to explain what Superman 2025 needs to do in order for the movie to be good. Starting with the suit. Somehow, there is so much disagreement when it comes to it. The moment the suit was announced, a lot of people hated it. Not me. I like it. The reason I like it is because, by the looks of it, Superman 2025 is going to be an introduction to the character. So, being Superman is going to be new for him as well as for us. In Man of Steel, Clark receives the suit after he finds out he is not from Earth. So he explores inside a Kryptonian ship that somehow had a pre-made suit for him. In the new movie, it should be different. In a lot of comics, the first suit Superman gets is made by his mom, and to me, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of people were complaining that the suit was too baggy, but if it's made by Martha, then it has a reason to be baggy. It reminds me of Spider-Man Homecoming, the way he begins being a hero with his homemade suit and eventually gets his iconic suit. Plus, a lot of fan-made sketches have come out, and come on, you can't tell me that doesn't look cool. The new Superman movie should be an opposite depiction of what came before. As I mentioned before, the movie is going to be based on All-Star Superman. All-Star Superman is the most human Superman I've seen in comics. If you haven't read the comic is about Superman living his last days on Earth because he contracted a deadly disease that is slowly killing him. Instead of feeling pity for himself, he decides that with the remaining days that he has, he is going to save as many people as possible, as well as to do the most humanitarian work as possible. And in this comic, we get some of the most iconic comic book panels from Superman, like the time Superman saves a girl from jumping off a building. Not by catching her, by talking to her and feeling her pain, connecting with her to the core. And that is what I think the movie should be about. Plus, I think we should see a different side of Superman that I think we have never seen before in live action movies. The side where Clark is not Superman. There has been an emphasis on the new Jimmy Olsen, and there has been a lot of marketing behind it, which I think is great because in earlier movies, he's not a big focal point, which is weird because Jimmy is one of Superman's best friends. He does appear in Man of Steel, but is killed off super early and works in the CIA. And apparently he was killed off quickly because Zack thought there was no room for him in his universe, which is very stupid because he's a really important character in the Superman universe. So important that in All-Star Superman, he even wears a watch that can emit an ultrasonic sound that only Superman can hear whenever he is in trouble. And I think this might come in handy in the new Superman movie, adding a cool plot point in the movie. In addition to Jimmy Olsen, I really pray to God that they make Lois Lane correctly in this movie. In previous movies, she is completely sidelined or just reading as a love interest to Superman, but she is much more important than that. She's a character that shares the same values that Superman does, and that is why Superman falls in love with her. James Gunn should give her a bigger role in this new movie, a way to show Superman that she is capable of helping in ways that he can't. As long as the movie includes these things that I mentioned, the movie is going to be amazing. If there is something that you think should be added to the movie, leave it in the comments down below. If you like this type of content, please leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.